We got a great case today, a great interview. A young rep who's selling to executives in the security space. I know a lot of listeners out there do sell in the IT security space. Even if you don't, you're going to enjoy this episode for a couple reasons. One, how do you become comfortable talking to executives? How do you learn about obscure security capabilities, technology, infrastructure, when it is overwhelming? I was in that space, and it is not so much complex, but just broad and deep, and the people in it are very specialized. How do you go about learning all that stuff, as well as the business side? Because it is a business case to justify it, an enterprise product, a large high-ticket dollar amount, and given that you're a startup, how do you focus on the accounts that will close, which is critical. We're going to talk about a lot of great things in this episode. I think you're really going to like it. This is one of my favorites because what I'd like to see is people who step up to it. Don't get intimidated by it. A lot of us are selling in spaces that we weren't trained in. We didn't go to college for, but we still need and want to be successful in them. And we could do one of two things. We could rely on other people, or we can embrace it and learn from it. Before we get into the interview, I want to make sure you're checking out the B2B Revenue Leadership Podcast. This week, we've got our friend Kevin Jans on there. He has been on the podcast a couple times. He's been through the training. He's crushing it in his company. But what he's going to do for you is help you understand how the federal government is buying right now. So if you're doing business with the federal government, either directly or indirectly through subcontractors or system integrators, or you'd like to, now's the time, and he'll explain why and how. So that's the B2B Revenue Leadership Podcast. Also, check out our friends over at Covideo. They're crushing it. If you're on LinkedIn, follow their company page, Covideo. They do a lot of helpful videos on how to use video, either through email or just in general, because we're all doing it right now, and how you can connect with your prospects and clients through it. Let's get into the interview. I'll sum it up at the end. And yeah, am I holding the prices of the courses? I will hold them until the end of April. So if you're serious, go to b2brevenue.com, check it out, schedule a time if you want to talk, or just sign up and lock in that bottom basement pricing. Jesus, what am I thinking? Here we go. Hey, Joe, welcome to the show. As a way of getting started, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, of course, Brian. Appreciate the time. My name is Joe Vink. I'm a strategic account executive for a cybersecurity SaaS company based in the DC area. Been with the company for just about 3 years, which makes me one of the tenured-old guys at our small, rapidly growing company. I was the 24th employee, and we just crossed 100 about last week. So it's been exciting to see our growth and expansion over the past couple of years. We primarily work with large enterprise organizations and some government customers as well, but my focus is solely on the commercial space. Over the last couple of years, my territory has been primarily on the West Coast. So I've been doing a lot of cross-country travel back and forth. And this year, we started a new territory sort of experiment with verticalizing. So I'm the guinea pig in a technology vertical. So my territory now is a named account list of 100 primarily tech companies.
Cool. And why'd you decide to go into sales?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I actually started my career looking for a consulting role, sort of the traditional, 22-year-old coming fresh out of school. Didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, and I thought, consulting would be a really good way to learn a little bit about a lot of things. In my search for a consulting role that ultimately led me to Gartner, who I'm sure you're familiar with, and just exploring opportunities with Gartner, found a sales and sort of consulting opportunity there. So started my career at Gartner, and it was a inside sales role working with small to mid-sized businesses defined as anything under $1 billion in revenue. So I was able to achieve the goal of learning a little bit about a lot of things, while at the same time getting some really good foundational sales skills that a large enterprise like Gartner will have just as part of their sort of sales machine and sales organization. Yeah.
And then you went to a startup. What was the motivation there? Did you have a friend there or what?
Yeah, it was a couple of things. So one of the other cool things about working at Gartner is you talk to CIOs and other IT leaders your whole day. So I was able to get a pretty good grasp and hear just some specific pain points from the market. And it ties really nicely into how I even came across this startup. Essentially, the problem we help solve here is helping security teams communicate more effectively with their business peers. So just as the spotlight on security has grown and grown over the last couple of years and more investment has gone into it, it's only natural that business peers and really a non-technical audience start to ask a lot of questions about, well, with all this investment we're throwing into cybersecurity, is it actually reducing risk? And there's this old saying in the industry, and people say CISOs waste half their budget. They just don't know which half. Really, that's what we help solve. Yeah, and so that's sort of our mission here. And I came across that firsthand at Gartner. I had a customer as a CIO. He said, our security budget has gone up 20% year over year for the last 5 years, and I have no idea how to explain to the rest of the business what this has bought. Can you help? And ultimately, just through research, I came across this company, RiskLens, where I've been now for the last few years, and that's what we work with the market to do.
Cool. And so do you sell to the CISO or do you sell to the CIO or?
Yeah, so CISO is our most common executive sponsor. Given the nature of what we do, it's often, it's not a technical cybersecurity solution. It's more of a cyber risk management solution. So it's not uncommon for CROs to get involved as well. They're oftentimes on sort of the leadership committee that is making the investment decision. But typically from a funding perspective, CISOs would be the most common executive sponsor we work with. Yeah.
And is this category already defined or are you guys defining it?
Yeah, we actually are. We're kind of elbowing out our niche within what Gartner calls the IRM space. So if you listen to any of the Gartner analysts or read any of the research, there's a critical capability of integrated risk management that they define as risk quantification and analytics. And that's what we do. We have an analytics software platform to help big companies better understand the financial impact if a cyber event were to take place. So what that allows them to do is run simulations, and then from there, compare different investments and start to articulate risk reduction and business impact if this incident were to actually manifest.
And what's the hardest part of your job? Is it getting that first conversation started? Or
honestly, the first conversation has been honestly pretty easy.
Okay,
I'll be really honest. When I first started a couple of years ago, having no pipeline and being sort of young and just ambitious, I was just hammering the phones, hammering emails, trying to get as many conversations as I could, and got a lot. And it was the sort of thing where we had to look back after 6 months and we said, man, we're having all of these initial meetings, some good demos, but nothing's closing. Like what's going on? So the hardest part for us is how do you take something that is aspirational and something that people will say, yeah, I should probably be doing that, but also helping them understand, one, the sort of tangible business case, but also secondarily, how do they manage the culture change associated with this?
Yeah.
Because when we talk about helping security teams communicate more effectively with their business peers, of course we have the technology to give them the nice reports and the background analytics, but at the end of the day, it's someone going to their leadership team to say, hey, we're changing the way we're making decisions, right? And the way we're managing the millions of dollars you're giving us from a funding perspective. So that's probably the hardest part is partnering with a customer to help manage the culture change.
And how do you do that? Because I get your space, because I was in that type of space where it's like, they view it as a nice to have. How do you turn it into a must have? Yeah.
And it's ultimately there's sort of, I think, two phases to that to answer the question. The first phase is you manage the culture change by breaking it down into smaller steps and milestones. So we say, listen, this is not a software platform where we say, congratulations, here's the license, have fun and enjoy, right? This is something where we're going to get started, then we're going to have 3, 6, 9, 12, 18, and 36-month milestones that we're going to work together on towards building towards and manage the culture change over time. As far as really the second part of the question and helping the market understand why this is a must-have rather than a need to have or than a nice to have, goes back to the point you made earlier about helping CISOs managing their budget more effectively, right? So when we think about CISOs wasting half their budget, they just don't know which half. Really at the core of what we do, it's helping optimize security budgets, right? So if we can increase your efficiency in budget, we're ultimately going to be self-funding. So there's been countless occasions where we help a security team realize that a certain program or a certain tool is redundant and unnecessary. Therefore, they can eliminate that vendor or that process. So those are the sorts of things that we have to work for with customers, but ultimately it's sort of unique because we have to find those together. Yeah. And from there, use that as the justification for the investment in us.
And what's that first investment look like? Is that a 10K, 100K?
Yeah, so typical ACV is about 200K. And that's a mix of software and services. Yeah. We do have sort of smaller trials and pilots and things like that in that 10 to 15K price point for folks who do want to try it out and see a real life example. That's something we can do. But typically ACV, 12-month licensing is about 200K.
And how about like a greenfield account? What's the first deal look like? Is it kind of like you described, like a 3-month proof of concept type thing that you?
Yeah. So with a totally new opportunity, there's a week-long pilot that we do where we work with them to quantify a handful of scenarios that are relevant for them. That's a small consulting engagement. Like I said, only takes a week. And then from there, typical first year investment, does fall right around 200K. So yeah. From there, we see people upgrade pretty significantly.
And are they willing to go from that proof of concept trial thing all the way to 200K or?
Yeah, I mean, there are, of course, smaller solutions under that, but from a first year standpoint, our average deal size falls roughly around there. So
cool. And how many of those can you do a year?
So about 5 to 6 is what we've been averaging in the past, and for me to hit quota, that'll be the the objective.
So out of that 100, how do you determine which 5 or 6 are going to be those?
That's a good question.
Right. So you can give the other 95 to someone else.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to that, right? Because it's especially in enterprise, right? You can spend a lot of time kind of chasing your own tail, and prioritizing your time effectively is really important. And for us, ultimately, it comes down to just for some more sort of background and context and how we actually do this, right? The model at the base of the platform was developed by one of our co-founders. It's called the FAIR model. It stands for Factor Analysis of Information Risk. It's an international standard for applying dollars and cents to cybersecurity risk. That is an international standard, like I said. It's not our proprietary model. While the guy that wrote it co-founded RiskLens, there is a rapidly growing movement independent of our business, just on the education and proliferation of that model itself. So it's taught in like 35 universities. There's a whole nonprofit dedicated to local chapter groups and different meetups all over the world, just to educate sort of local markets about that model. So in terms of how I find those 5 or 6, really it's the people that like FAIR. Because the people who are willing to invest 200K to build out a program around this are the ones who already like the model and are bought in on this being sort of the future of how cybersecurity teams make decisions.
Because that's it. Because I could see in that space, you could spend your whole year having those great first meetings, educating people. Mm-hmm. And then they're like, or maybe they do that first little trial, but then it gets stuck on the pile of good ideas.
Sure. Yeah. Right? It becomes a science project.
Right. Yeah.
This was cool, but what do I do next?
Yeah. And what are the signals that you get from the client that it's not just going to be a science project?
Yeah, very defined objectives. So they come out of that engagement and say, this was time well spent. Next, I want to understand the top 10 risks to our business for our next board meeting. Because traditionally how companies and how security executives are communicating to their leadership teams is in high, mediums, and lows, or heat maps like red, yellow, green.
Yeah.
So they say, we've got 5 high risks. Well, the second you ask, well, which one of those highs is more high than the other high, it gets really difficult, right? And if we spend $1 million on high number 1, does it become a medium? Does it become a low? There's very little analytical rigor or any science behind it. It's very, very gut feel. So to your question about how do we know it's not just going to be a science project, it's really defined objectives. So coming out and saying something like, I want to be ready for a next board report, that's a very good sign for us.
And how did you build up your security acumen and your business acumen? Yeah.
So my background is in business. I studied international business and economics in school. So that's, I would say personally, one of the areas where that's just a strength for me. As far as security acumen, it's definitely been something that's happened over the course of time. Gartner gave me a good foundation, just enough to be dangerous in the basics of security. But then from there, I spend a lot of time educating myself. I find it's especially in enterprise where you spend a lot of time working with the same customer, right? It's super high touch deals. You can actually form really good relationships. And when you're meeting in person or getting dinner and getting drinks, you can learn a lot from them beyond just information and data that's helpful with closing the deal. Yeah. Of course, you're going to, be taking notes on all those sorts of things you hear over the martini. You're also going to be able to learn things about their background in cybersecurity and what have they seen and what trends are they noticing. So I learn just as much from my customers as I do from my own personal readings and things like that.
That's it. Because I went from enterprise software to like enterprise security.
Yeah.
Right. And it's a whole nother world. And you're dealing with people who talk in acronyms.
Right.
So it is learning another language because you got to take that acronym and hash it in your brain into what it is.
Right.
Yeah. And I can't imagine any part of the enterprise is changing faster than security.
Yeah, it's so fascinating because for as many resources as have been thrown at it, right? And there's been countless companies who have told me their security budget is unlimited, right? If they need something and they make a case for it, they go to the board or to their leadership and say, we need this, write me a check. For that sort of environment and that sort of culture, most companies still aren't doing it well. Right?
Clearly, right? The biggest ones.
It's fascinating. So, but you're right. It's a very interesting culture, just in terms of the security community itself can feel very small at times and is very, very tight knit.
Right, because the people on the other side are more ambitious than the people in the inside.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's true. Yeah.
And they always, they find the social engineering piece. They leave the little memory stick out in the parking lot, and somebody puts it on a machine, or
exactly. Yeah.
Put it. Oh, here's this app and a text. Give it a shot, and all of a sudden they capture their phone.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, I mean, that space is intriguing. Now, if I talk to probably 99 out of 100 reps that are at this point in your career, they would not be as secure as you are, as far as your ability to talk to a senior executive.
Mm-hmm.
But what happened in your life that allowed you to do that?
Wow, that's a good question. I mean, for me personally, I have to give basically all the credit to my parents. They, from an early age, encouraged me and put me in positions where I had to communicate really effectively with, when I was a kid, with adults, right? And I had to learn from the time I was 14, 15 years old, almost old enough to start working. They encouraged me to start working. So I started my first company when I was 15 years old with two buddies of mine, and we started a small DJ business. So I grew up in the Phoenix area. So if you were a family throwing a party for your 16-year-old kid's birthday party, and you wanted some young kids to come and DJ the party. That was us. We did homecomings and proms for the whole Phoenix area public school community. So that sort of ambition that they really instilled in me, I think, led me to the point where I had to learn how to communicate really effectively. And I think that's the sort of thing when, especially in enterprise sales, it's invaluable.
Yeah. And I take it there's little to no inbound.
There's actually a lot of inbound.
There is.
Yeah, there is. So top of funnel historically has not been an issue for us. Yeah. There's a lot of inbound, and there's a lot of intrigue in the market that we have, because it's something that's complex and dynamic like cybersecurity. And if we can assign a dollar value to, if this thing takes place, what will the business impact be? That perks a lot of ears out. So there's actually a good amount of inbound for us.
And is it inbound that's interested in evaluating the product, or inbound interested in learning about the problem?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's an important area when we're qualifying those inbounds to get really good at identifying, because there's a lot of people who are just intrigued, right? They want to learn. They're super curious. They want to get started on the journey, but it's not going to be a deal for us anytime soon. So when we think about training for our new hires and our BDRs, right, it's identifying, is this a legit opportunity for us in the next couple of quarters, or is this someone who, they're intrigued and we should give them training or something like that. So more often than not, it's someone who's intrigued, but for us, it's about, rapid qualification and determining how should we prioritize this.
And what helped you, just going from the inside role at Gartner to an enterprise rep and a complex early stage company? That's a big leap.
Yeah.
What helped you along that process?
Yeah. Early on when I first started, like I said, I was mid-20s in terms of the number of employees when I began. We were at the point where we had just raised a Series A, and we were starting to build out the sales team a bit. I had firsthand experience with the challenge coming from Gartner and hearing from a few customers. So I think that's how I was able to convince our CEO to take a chance on me. But from there, in terms of how have I been able to continue to find success here, honestly, the number one thing that I think people who have success in enterprise sales are good at are putting themselves in their customer's shoes. Yeah. And you talk about this in a lot of your content, but if you can be a really good listener, and I was guilty of this, we've all been guilty of it. We want to share how we can help. We want to talk about our product, our services, all the great things we have to offer. But even just taking a pause and taking a breath and asking one more question. It doesn't have to be complex, but just that's really interesting. Can you tell me more about that? Or can you share a recent example or something to get one more piece of data out? That's one thing. That will lead to such a better understanding of what the customer's not only pain point is, but what they want to accomplish. And if you can understand those really, really clearly, you can prescribe a solution that's going to be a no-brainer.
And I got to believe in your space, they don't always buy for the reasons that you think. There's always some kind of little hook that they're really concerned about that you might not have thought of.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting you say that. I mean, we can think we have, our description of a super tight business case, right? And, it's going to make all the business sense in the world, but oftentimes it's just a CISO who loves FAIR, the model we're based on, and has a board meeting coming up in a few months, and they want to look good at it, right? So they're going to give this a shot and be prepared for it. So yeah, that's a good point.
Cool. Any key epiphany that you had throughout your career? I the curiosity seems to come through consistently, but anything that you were doing wrong early on that you just kind of woke up one day and you go, I should change that?
Yeah. I spent a lot of time early on trying to convince people. And I think it's, the stereotypical definition of someone in sales, right? I'm here to convince you of something that you may or may not need. I catch myself still, right? If I'm trying to convince, or even if I'm doing too much talking, I'm probably not doing my job right. And I think it comes to one, being a human, right? And recognizing, and if we're working together and I'm in sales, you're a prospect, we're working together to see if this is a good fit. And if not, I'll be the first one to let you know that I don't think it is, and here's why. And if it is, then I'll let you know, and here's a solution. And if it is, then great, we'll shake hands and we'll do business. So I think it's you're not convincing, right? You're asking good questions to ultimately prescribe a solution.
Yeah, because you got those 100 accounts, you need to close 5, you could crush it by closing 10.
Yeah.
Pushing somebody who doesn't want to go there or doesn't get it yet or isn't ready or doesn't care, it's not the strategy.
Exactly. Yeah, especially at this stage of our business, retaining a customer is just as important as landing a customer.
Yeah.
So if we have churn on the back end, then that looks worse than almost not hitting our revenue goal on the acquisition side of things. So
cool. Hey, this has been a great conversation. Where can people go to connect with you and learn more about you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm getting much more active on it, so I'm on it all the time. So hit me up. My name's Joe Vink, and appreciate the time, Brian. It's been a lot of fun.
I really like talking to Joe. I got a sense of confidence from him, a sense of curiosity, and just working smarter, figuring out those 5 deals out of the 100 or so or thousands that he could work on that can and will close. Too many of us in sales, we get happy being busy instead of being focused on what we can really accomplish within the time we're given. And the busyness gets in the way. And a lot of times it's not so much our fault, but it doesn't matter. But our managers push us numbers. But the numbers that matter are the numbers that close. At the end of the year, it's not going to matter how many emails or phone calls you made. It's only going to matter how much revenue you generated. Activity does drive results, but which activities? How good were the activities? Who did you spend that activity with? That judgment and prioritization is your superpower. Your focus is your superpower. Hustling and grinding it's part of it, but it alone doesn't generate the results as the sale gets more and more complicated. If you're selling B2C, door-to-door, that might. Doing renewals or telesales, low-cost products, it might. But as you get bigger into more complex products and B2B, selling to strangers, it becomes harder. These are the type of things that I teach in the course is how do you determine those 5, what I call the precious few. It's a lot of detective work. It's a lot of analyzing what you're doing and how you're doing it, and really getting deep into what matters most. And this doesn't happen naturally. We like to be distracted. We naturally are reactive. It takes our cognitive thought, our focus to prioritize and get into what really matters. This I teach in both courses. When you start a conversation and you get a meeting, why do it with anybody who you don't think is going to be qualified? There's a lot of people out there. There's a lot of companies. But there are certain signals, certain prioritizations, certain timing elements that help us determine who we should be talking to, what we should be talking to them about, and how to keep the decision moving. When you see like the sale that we're talking about today, there's a lot of people interested, a lot of people curious about it. But how do you take that from a nice to have to a must have? How do you start building up the implications of not having it, the cost of not having it, and get the right people focused on it? A lot of people in the course ask me, how can you tell? One of the big tells is, do they care? Is there an emotional connection to the problem that you solve and the implications of not solving it? If there isn't, you can create it. You can. It's a talent. It takes time. And we should, if we have the time, do that. But why do it if there's somebody who already recognizes it? A lot of us, we go through the exercise of selling and the deals slow or stall. This is the nature of the large complex sale. This is not the exception. We always act like it's the exception. The exception is that they do buy, especially when you're talking to a new account that they haven't purchased before. Renewals and expansion within an existing account is a much easier sell, and you should focus on that because the relationship is already there, the recognition of the problems there, the use of the product is already there. A lot of the sale is already done. It's just expanding from there. It's getting into those new accounts. And that's where the gold is, because they're incremental. They would not happen otherwise. And since that is where the money is, that is what we have to build as a talent. Now, this time of year, this time in our history, is one of these unique times where we should be investing in ourselves. It has the best return of any investment. Why? You have control over it. You own it. No one can ever take it away from you, as opposed to other things. And nobody's judgment of it diminishes it. You have it. It is your skill. It is your talent. You've chosen this profession of sales. Take it to the next level. Invest in you. You or your parents put money into college, into whatever you did. A lot of money, a lot of time, 4 years, maybe more, maybe a little less for some of us. But we made that investment with the hope that it would pay off. And sometimes it does. A lot of times it does. It gets us into a nice company and stuff. But then we have to learn a marketable skill, a skill that takes us to the next level. And when I talk with salespeople, which I do all day, their ability to have a conversation about what the other person cares about, turn it into a business discussion, and create curiosity and interest, and then turn it into urgency, that is a life-changing skill because it applies to almost everything in life. Everything that we want is in the hands of somebody else right now, and it's up to us to persuade them to work with us. Sales is something that we do with people. It's not just reactive. It's a proactive profession and a skill and a performance that is not just knowledge. How do you learn? You learn from others who have done it. You learn by watching others do it. You learn from getting feedback of you doing it. That's what the courses all have. Has all the content, which is video-based. You listen to it whenever you have time, at the pace you want to consume it, in the order that you want to consume it. It's curated for you in a particular order so that it compounds upon itself. But it's up to you to take it, ingest it, apply it, get feedback. But you're not alone. You're part of a community where you get to meet up with other people every other Friday for an hour, record it, and put back in the course. You get to schedule a one-on-one with yours truly to talk through applying it to your particular situation, which helps you get it out of your head to talk about it. Because when it's in our head, we get comfortable thinking, oh, we're good at it, we know it, we have a complete view of it. That's a big mistake. No matter how well you know something, it is still incomplete. And it always will be, because it's a performance. We can do it better and better every day. And that's really where we should be, making that investment in ourselves in a systematic, repeatable, consistent way. In the course, there's probably an hour to 2 hours a week of fresh content. All the one-on-ones are recorded and put back in the course. All the office hours are recorded and put back in the course so that others can consume it as you need. And we break down the complex sale and getting conversation started into tiny little pieces so that it's little bite-sized pieces that you can take, apply, see how well you're doing, get feedback from both the market and other people, and become better at it. Now, I'm holding the prices till the end of April to help everybody out, but this is the time. You have the time, so that the time argument isn't there. The money, it's not expensive. Check it out. It's either a lunch or a dinner, and it will pay for itself before you get the bill. That's the beauty of it, is that you can start applying it right now. And you get a community of great salespeople, people who want to become better, people who want to learn from other people. And that's something that I think we all need right now. So go check it out at b2brevenue.com. Hey, I appreciate everybody listening to the podcast. I'm looking for other great salespeople. If you're a great salesperson, or you'd just like to share your story, your view on sales, your particular scale with the community, love to have you on. Hit me up on LinkedIn, Brian G. Burns on LinkedIn. If you see my content fly by on your feed, give it a little thumbs up. I'd appreciate that. A little comment, a little share would be nice. Check out the YouTube channel, Brian Burns Sales on YouTube. And we'll see you next time. Check out the other two podcasts, B2B Revenue Leadership Show and Sales Questions, Brutally Honest Answers. I'm putting out a lot of content here for free. The YouTube channel, you get to watch the people, so you get to know them as well and get a sense of who they are and how they present themselves. So check out the YouTube channel. We see you next time.